Vote will call the meeting of October 5th, 2020 to order. Start off with Commissioners' Public Forum, if anyone's here for that. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, moving on. Minutes of the water and sewer meeting and warrants. What do you have for us, Paul?
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as written for 9/14/2020.
I second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we might as well go to a roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Cantwell,
Aye.
and Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
All right.
All right, what do you have next, Paul?
I would next like to make a motion to approve the following warrants. First of all, we have commissioner salary for $400. And then we've got a slew of them from Veolia for the new pumps for the EQ tanks that we approved of 6/22/2020 for $5,415.22. Next, we have another one for Veolia for the impeller to rebuild the EQ pump tank, $745.07. Again to Veolia for the generator repair at J. Hammond Pump Station, $205.46. Another one for Veolia for North Sturbridge Road insurance claim, $1,276.11. And another one from Veolia for North Sturbridge Road. I don't know if it's the same address or not, $666.55. One more for Veolia for August 2020 emergency services at the wastewater treatment plant and the Glen Echo Pump Station and 135 Sunset Boulevard, $836.36. One more for Veolia for 5 East 6 and 6W lab testing for August of 2020, $184. And the last one for Veolia, September monthly services, $40,850.32. And lastly, a warrant for WB Mason for office supplies for $30.98 for a grand total of $50,610.07.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on those items?
Motion to accept.
I'm sorry, what was that, Bill?
A motion to accept.
Yep, I guess we'll roll call vote on that.
Okay, Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue.
Aye. I thought we needed a second.
Paul made the motion. When Paul makes the motion, then he reads it, and then Dave seconded it. So the motion was already on
I'm
the
learning the
floor.
quorum.
Yep. Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Cantwell,
Aye.
and Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
All right.
All right, moving right along to our scheduled 6:40.
Yes, so
We have
I believe, yes, John Oatley and Vinnie Masterson are both on the meeting with us. John, I believe they're going to start by going over the zinc pilot study and what they found so far. So I'll just turn it over to John.
Okay. Great, Pete. I'm not sure how best to walk the commissioners through the data, on the Zoom meeting, but I did share with Peter a copy of the most recent graph.
Yeah, I can bring that up right now, John, if you want to give me a second.
All right. Well, while Peter does that.
Is it up now?
Yep, I see it. Perfect. Okay, so where we stand is, as you know, the administrative order was had an expiration date of the pilot study as of September 30th. So we are officially beyond the pilot study period. We still have few sample results to come in, which will complete the entire period of 3-month scope for the pilot study. So that's kind of where we're at right now, waiting for a few more samples to come in, and then we'll have the complete picture to then draft a report. that the commission can then review, and then we can submit on behalf of the town of Charlton. So that's kind of the background. What this chart shows is the data to date. And just for everyone's purpose, the different colors represent the three different parameters that we were measuring throughout the pilot, and that is zinc, aluminum, and copper. And you'll see that there's on the graph 2 black vertical lines separating the graph into 3 distinct periods of time. The first period of time up to the first black line, which ended on September 8th, is the period of time where we were using sulfite at a 2 parts per million per volume dosage. And in between the 2 black lines is the period of time where we were at a sulfide level of 4 ppmv. And then right now we're running currently at a 6 ppmv. And again, just for everyone's purposes, we're adding the sulfide as to try to create zinc hydroxide, which would then precipitate out in the COMAG process. The aluminum is used as the coagulant to not only precipitate that zinc hydroxide, but also the phosphate that's part of the overall COMAG process. The administrative order required us, it gave us some interim limits for zinc and aluminum, but it mandated that we continue to meet all of the parameters for compliance throughout the pilot test. So any questions so far? And if I go too fast, please just interrupt, and I tend to speak a little quickly. So with that being said, let's just start at the bottom with copper, because that's the easiest one to explain on the chart. You can clearly see, okay, and just so you know, there are both a maximum daily limit and a monthly limit for each of the parameters. So for copper, the dashed line at the bottom is the daily max limit in the permit of 28 micrograms per liter. And the solid line, straight line, is the monthly limit, which is an average of all the samples taken in the month at a 20 milligram per liter. And you can see that throughout the pilot test, we had no monthly limit excursions. We had one daily limit at the beginning of the pilot that didn't exceed the daily limit, but in and of itself would have been above the monthly limit. But again, because of the averaging, it did not result in that. But what you will notice is that the trend with the increase in sulfite is that copper is going in the positive direction. As you know, we weren't targeting copper as part of the pilot, but because copper, like zinc, was a sporadic parameter that kind of creeped up on us in terms of compliance, we just felt it was good to track that as well. But you can clearly see that, you know, as the sulfide level began to increase, we started to see a downward trajectory of copper results, which is a positive step. Now let's move up to zinc, which is the blue lines. So as part of the administrative order, we had the upper blue line, solid blue line, was a new interim limit that EPA gave us for the pilot, and that's 204 milligrams per liter. Interestingly enough, in the pilot, the interim limit, they gave us a daily and a monthly limit of 204. So it's actually both daily and monthly average limit. And you can see throughout the entire pilot, we did not even approach close to that zinc limit of 204. That being said, the whole purpose of the pilot was to see how well we could remove zinc in relationship to the existing NPDES limit of 142. And again, just like the interim limit, the daily max and the monthly limit are the same, set at 142. And you can see throughout the pilot, all except for one data point, would we have exceeded the original or existing, if you will, 142 milligram per liter. And that was a 145 sample point. And you can see it kind of coincided with an increase in aluminum as well. So, you know, there are a lot of factors that could potentially go into metals analysis, and that is, you know, slightly higher elevated turbidities because of flow or upsets in the process, potentially as a result of mechanical issues, et cetera. But overall, as part of the pilot, we were able to maintain the interim limit well below the interim limit, and also be very close to the 142 monthly and daily max that we're currently at. But because we had that one parameter, and because we had a little bit of extra time on the pilot the last few days, we felt it incumbent upon us to just try to go up on the sulfide to a 6 ppmv to see if there's additional removal that we can see with an additional sulfide dose. We also looked at what impact the sulfide dose could have on reducing our aluminum value, because as you know, the whole gist of this is we have to remove zinc and copper, but we can't do it at the expense of exceeding the aluminum as a parameter. So moving on to the aluminum, there was one the limits for aluminum are a monthly average of 93 and a daily max of 803. There is no upper limit on this chart because the scale is really, would have to be really high, and we never even came close to that. But I can, so looking at the data, and again, aluminum's daily limit is 803, so there's absolutely zero risk that I can think of that we would ever exceed the daily limit. But what we're really targeting with the aluminum is this monthly average of 93. Right now, if you were to take all the sample points throughout the entire pilot, our average aluminum for the entire pilot was 120. And that included this really big spike of 359, which was somewhat of an anomaly. And it was about, early on in the pilot, trying to get the dosage right. But if you were to exclude that peak as an outlier, if you will, the average for all the other samples, let me just do that quickly, is a 97. Just slightly above the 93. Certainly not in compliance, not where we want it to be, but very, very close to the limit of aluminum at 93. So we do still have a little bit of work to do as far as the aluminum is concerned if we want to continue to use that as a coagulant in the future. What we're looking for is the final 3 samples that are set to come in at the end of the month at the higher sulfide level to see if that brings that aluminum level below the 93 enough that we have confidence that we'll be able to meet the monthly average for that. The AO in its verbiage, and I spoke with Peter earlier today about it. We are going to look for clarification from the EPA because the verbiage in the AO lists or acknowledges that the interim limits as part of this zinc pilot study would remain in effect up until either a new permit is issued at the end of October or until the EPA withdraws the order. It's our understanding, at least initially, that would mean that we would revert back to the original NPDES limits, but the way it's actually worded, it suggests that they may keep the interim limits as your permanent limits. So we're going to need to get some clarification from EPA on that. And I know Vinny has reached out to the EPA looking for that clarification. So what does it mean? It certainly shows that the sulfide does have impact on the metals, particularly zinc and copper. And the aluminum certainly works as an effective coagulant. I can share with you that all the other parameters for the plant throughout this period of time have been good and somewhat improved, particularly with respect to the difference between aluminum and iron in the UV disinfection. The iron salts that we use as part of the original design is a very dirty chemical, and it tends to stain a lot of the crystal sleeves within the UV system, as well as all the pipes, and it creates like the rust, if you will, throughout the plant. The aluminum is a clear product, has no impact whatsoever on any downstream equipment. It also has a neutral pH where the iron has a very, very acidic pH, which we then have to supplement with caustic dose to bring that pH back up to remain in compliance on effluent, as well as any sort of acidity impacts on the metal pieces within the COMAG and downstream process. So that's that's the summary, you know, obviously the 10 cent or the 10,000 foot view of it. We will summarize all of this in a narrative and an analysis of the data once all of it comes in, and present the report to the commission for a draft review before submittal onto the EPA.
John, have you adjusted the pack dosing at all?
We have not. Throughout the entire pilot, we have maintained the existing pack because what we wanted to focus on was changing the sulfide, and not change two parameters to see which one have an impact. Because we're so close to the limit of aluminum, once we get the data back from the sulfide increase, if that doesn't drive the aluminum down, Peter, we're going to need to adjust the aluminum. The reason we didn't do that initially is, you know, what Vinny looks at and what the plant really looks at more than anything is turbidity. So we're very cognizant of what impacts we make on turbidity in terms of dosing of the aluminum. Because as we know, as turbidity goes up, which is really a function of material carryover through the COMAG system, when you soluble or when you acidify those particles, for lack of a better word, we know that there's metals trapped in them, and you're going to re-release them into the effluent through the sampling. So turbidity is a key function. That being said, where we currently operate, unless this sulfide sampling comes in a positive direction, we're going to need to make an adjustment to the aluminum. But I think if they give you the interim limits as conditional limits or permanent limits until the new permit gets issued, you don't have a monthly limit for aluminum, at least as outlined in the interim limits. It's just a report only. So once we get clarification on that, Pete, we'll have a better understanding of what, if anything, we need to do with the aluminum. You know, the other caveat to all this is because we could not jeopardize any other parameters within the plant, phosphorus, particularly fecal, any of the other metals, the lead, the copper, as well as TSS, et cetera. You know, we were very, very, very nervous about changing the big coagulant dose as much as we were focused on driving the sulfide or the zinc hydroxide, driving the metal hydroxides, I should say, down into the COMAG process. But again, to your point, you know, we're not confident that we can achieve the aluminum monthly limit. We're confident we will never exceed the daily max, but that's only half of the equation. But we are very confident at this point that precipitating zinc out as a zinc hydroxide using the sulfide is a viable option going forward for compliance. And then it becomes what coagulant do we settle on? And unfortunately, our previous pilot testing has demonstrated that the iron does not mix well with the sulfide in terms of turbidity. So that's the summary of where we are at this point in time. Again, I think probably by the end of this week, we will have the 3 remaining sample points, and I think they'll show us a clearer path forward with the aluminum.
John, what's your time frame to submit that report to the?
I think once we get the data, I would suspect just a couple days to pull it together, Pete, and then get it over to you for review and comment and edit. We certainly aren't going to submit anything without, the town's approval. And then we need an answer from EPA on what the AO actually represents in terms of limits going forward. It indicates that they're going to be issuing a new permit by the end of October, but I find that as an interesting comment.
Right. So it kind of the AO contradicts itself, and I'll bring it up here. Hopefully you can see it. So this is the consent order. Here under item 2, this says the study shall end on or before September 30th, and the treatment plant shall be in compliance with total zinc and total aluminum NPDES permit limits by October 31st, 2020. And it talks about, point sources and that. But then down here, like I said, this is where John references the NIPD's permit. These interim limits shall expire upon issuance of a new NIPD's permit to the town on October 31st, 2020, or upon termination of this order by EPA, whichever occurs sooner. So I think our NIPD's permit was issued in 2011. So it expired probably in 2014 or 2015, and we've just been working under the same one that's been expired for the last 5 years now. It has been, I think, issued to the EPA to a new writer to start working on the new permit, but we have, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the process is they usually provide us with a draft new NIPD's permit for us to comment on, to review and
Correct.
comment on before they accept it. And that has not been shared with us. So I really don't think that they're going to have a new NIPD's permit to give to us by October 31st. And then,
Yeah, I mean,
then
my
also,
goal, yeah, you know, it would be used, I mean, given that the aluminum is very close, where we currently stand with aluminum being about 100 micrograms per liter on average at the current treatment scheme and doing very well for zinc and copper. You know, I certainly want to petition them to at least raise that aluminum monthly average up slightly to allow us to continue this very effective process for all the other parameters that we're monitoring and measuring. So
John,
go ahead.
John, Dave Campbell here.
It is.
Question for you. At any of the other facilities that you managed, do you have any of these zinc or aluminum issues or problems? And if you do or don't, is it definitely caused from some type of industrial rather than household waste?
Well, what I can share with you is that the reason we're applying this strategy to Charlton is because the town of Sturbridge went through the exact same issue several years ago, where their new permit came out with a much tighter zinc limit than the plant was originally designed to treat. They employed the exact same strategy the town of Charlton has, where they first investigated point sources throughout their service area. And they could not, similar to what we have found, actually find a single point source that they could, you know, eliminate that would result in, you know, compliance at the treatment plant. And I can tell you that study was even far more extensive and over a longer period of time than we've engaged here in Charlton. Ultimately, what we came up with was this aluminum strategy and zinc and sulfide strategy that has proven to be very successful in Sturbridge. Now, Sturbridge has a higher aluminum discharge limit than we have here in Charlton. So they have the benefit of being able to employ exactly what we're doing here, even at slightly higher dosage of both sulfides and aluminum, and still maintain their within compliance for aluminum. At the time, they were also adding ferric, and actually still add ferric as part of their biomag process. But in their COMAG process, they're employing the exact same strategy here. So the short answer is yes, we have other communities that have the exact same issue. However, we're just, because of our limits being slightly tighter, it's just becoming, you know, slightly more difficult to achieve the exact same results. Not because of the effectiveness of the treatment, but because of the levels at which we're required to drive the numbers down to. Now, we also have a community in Rhode Island that has a zinc limit, and their ballasted system was designed to remove zinc. But that was using a different process called Actiflow, which is sand ballasted flock, as opposed to COMAG, which uses the magnetite as ballasted flock. So,
do we know that it does not come from household waste, or could it be coming from household waste?
I mean, typically what we find is that zinc and copper are associated with the drinking water side of the service area, particularly during corrosion, you know, as a result of corrosion, pH and or sequestering it inside the pipe. There aren't, at least what we can find, enough in our analysis of enough point sources in Charlton to be the contributing factor, or the, you know, lack of a better word, smoking gun that if we were to eliminate that as a point source, we would have any confidence that we would be in compliance with zinc. Simply from a loading perspective, and that will be covered in the pilot report as part of the AO. We were instructed, and we did a review of point sources out in the collection system, and we've got some data that just has to be compiled. But I think we've had discussions prior to today that I don't think any of us believe that the loading is sufficient enough, or there's enough data to suggest that the loading is sufficient enough to, if eliminated, would result in compliance.
Curiosity, it's Phil. How did the town of Sturbridge, did they get an extension from the state? How did the state treat them?
Yeah, what the state did there, which was somewhat, they issued a facility. The engineer Teinbaum designed the biomag and comag process based on a draft permit, just like Peter described how the town of Sturbridge had a draft permit that was issued. That was the basis of design for the treatment plant. When the final permit came out, the draft permit didn't have a zinc limit, believe it or not. When the final permit came out, it had a zinc limit. And so what they did with the draft permit is they gave Sturbridge 2 years to implement a strategy to meet the zinc limit. So Sturbridge was kind of blindsided by even having the requirement of a zinc limit in their initial draft permit. And
So
despite their efforts to fight the limit, EPA didn't back down from it.
So is your situation resolved?
Well, it's resolved because we've employed a new chemical treatment process similar to what we're describing today in Sturbridge. So Sturbridge adds aluminum and sulfide to their COMAG process to achieve compliance.
Okay, so we're a couple of months out from really deciding here and knowing what the state's going to do with this then.
Yeah, I mean, I think, once we get these final results, and again, aluminum is a monthly average. So even if the next couple days shows that the aluminum's slightly above the monthly limit, we have the ability to switch right back to iron and therefore stop using aluminum. So we're not at risk at this point to violate the monthly limit for aluminum.
Okay.
But we've got a short window to make that decision. And I think we're looking at a couple of things. What EPA will get back to us on the wording in that AO. And secondly, whether or not the additional sulfide and or any additional aluminum adjustments we might want to make will drive the aluminum limit below the monthly limit on average. And then we can continue to employ the same strategy.
Yeah. Now, what's the strategy if the copper goes up?
Well, again, I don't have any confidence that if we weren't adding the sulfide, we wouldn't see the copper and zinc fluctuate like we historically have seen it. I think the application of the sulfide is clearly driving the zinc and copper to at least a control, within a control band of compliance.
Okay. Now,
We see it more on the
there's
copper,
been-
believe it or not, than even the zinc, which was an interesting find, but certainly worth noting. Peter, I don't know if you can call up the data. I don't know if you have it. I don't know if I just sent you the chart. But I think if you look at the data, since we started, and you don't have it in front of you, but the copper numbers since we started with the 4 ppmv have all but one been, yeah, here you go. I mean, you look at the last, 3 or 4 numbers. I mean, we've actually experienced single digits for copper, which is very good.
So John, from a town's perspective, or as kind of as I look at it, because the NIPD's permit has been expired, because we're having these issues that may require us to evaluate our treatment plant and possibly do upgrades. It's kind of hard to do that without the EPA at least letting us know when our new NIPD's permit is going to be, so we'll know if we have to make more than just more changes than just for one set of parameters, correct?
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, you can't make any other than what you already have as limits, you can't, unless they tell you, make any decisions about, future, future design requirements until you see that. And then hopefully they won't do to the town of Charlton what they did to Sturbridge, which was the draft permit didn't include a limit that was then part of the final permit. So.
Well, I guess my concern is we look at maybe doing some type of process changes where we invest, I'm not going to say a small amount, but say there was something we could do. An engineer came in and said, if you do $100,000 to do X, Y, and Z, it will take care of your zinc, copper, and aluminum issue. And then all of a sudden we get our new NIPD's permit and there's two different parameters that the EPA is looking to focus on also. That's going to cause us to do something different, where the improvement that we just made to handle zinc, copper, and aluminum might have an adverse effect on that other process. So,
sure, and any engineer, you're absolutely right, and any engineer worth their salt isn't going to, they don't work, they're going to design the process based on the limit you're trying to achieve. They're not going to give you a process that can achieve, a zero. So they're probably not even going to begin to think about what it's going to take to remove zinc, aluminum, copper, unless they know what they're trying to treat down to, because that involves all of the sizing and chemical dosages and all of that.
So I guess my hope is that we can, have a conversation with Doug Koopman from the EPA, share with him this information, and then also try and ask him, to see where we're at with our NIPD's permit, to see what might change. So if we do have to make any changes, we can go ahead and evaluate our plant to meet any and all new limits that they're going to be setting, or at least have the time to review the draft permit to make comments and see what we can do.
Yeah, and typically what they do, Pete, is when they give you your new permit, they will give you a period of time to address whatever needs of the plant. But in that interim period, they oftentimes will give you an interim limit. So I think when we talk to Koopman, we should, it would be my suggestion that we ask to maintain the existing interim limits up until the time where you see your new draft permit. So instead of reverting back to the existing limits, although for zinc and copper, I think, we'd be pretty safe to accept them. I think if we could convince them to keep the existing limits, given the level of effort that the town has been doing, and up until they actually tell you what you ultimately will need to design to going forward. I think that's a reasonable request. Now, they may say no, they might tell you to go pound sand, but, I think based on the level of effort and the commitment the town has made, both financially and through its contract to the resources that's been employed, not just at the plant, but out in the collection system, it's showing good faith. And the results are very promising. They're certainly less than they would have been without the pilot. I think.
So if we run into a situation where they don't, do we have secondary options? I've thrown out a couple in the past, but just wondering what your thoughts.
Well, again, I don't know that we have a treatment process that we could implement that would give us the confidence. We certainly could, not have a problem with aluminum, right? Because we'll just stop using and go back to iron. But I don't think we could give any confidence to anybody that we wouldn't continue to see zinc and copper excursions based on, the history of compliance with zinc and copper.
I'm just thinking, from what my reading has been in the past, lignin or very expensive polyactivated charcoal.
Well, there's certainly bolt-on, things that you could put on the effluent, like you said, carbon. You could certainly filter and trap all of the metals through some sort of filtration step. But you're right. The sizing and the expense of that, is
not cheap. You can add lignin in, but it's about probably 3 times from what I've researched the cost of doing what we're doing, the PAC and the Salt Lake.
So I think if we were going to look at any type of processes change, we would have to bring on an engineer to do some type of bench study and make some recommendations to.
Yeah, I mean, to your
Yeah,
point,
that-
the idea behind this whole pilot study was to try to, learn from what we employed in Sturbridge and apply it here to avoid that engineering step, if you will, which is really just spending money to analyze existing opportunities. But, again, I wish we were in a better place with the aluminum, but I am still optimistic that, because we're averaging about 100, 110, that we may be able to drive the aluminum dose down even further and still maintain turbidity levels that were,
Well,
trying
I'm
to target.
personally thinking maybe a combination of both. Maybe a hybrid system we're doing if we can get forward to where we need to of the PAC and then adding, something else on top of it.
I'm not opposed to trying something like that.
John, is there any other alternative besides ferric or PAC to add as a coagulant?
We looked at that cerium, which was that rare earth. We looked at that. Calcium's an option, but again, given the COMAG process, it really has to be either iron or aluminum.
Can't be a polyactivated charcoal?
I know we broached that subject with the manufacturer, the COMAG manufacturer. That we haven't got any response back from them on that. But I think the issue there is application and handling the amount of material and how best to apply it. Because you're talking about adding granulated carbon into the COMAG process.
Yeah, it could be powdered also, or you could go to lignum, which is a very basically it's still a dense product. Okay, it's just basically wood pulp, but it's been pulverized.
Right. It's certainly, I don't think we're objecting to any future attempts at continuing to drive the metals out of the COMAG influent. I think we would just have to work with the EPA at allowing us to move forward with another pilot or additional time to explore other options. And that's why I think if we are able to present to them, our case that they should keep the interim limit until you see the new permit limits, then we can reevaluate what other changes we might want to make and make a commitment during that time to continue to explore other alternatives as you describe.
And I think that's a great approach personally. I think that, whatever we can do that's cost effective is the best thing. Okay. And, that's the key, period.
So, I think where we stand today is it's an incomplete picture because I still don't have all the data to present to you. So my recommendation would be, we take everything we described under advisement at this point. Let's get the complete data set in front of everybody, which should be within a few days. And then perhaps reconvene, next Monday, Pete.
Okay.
And see where we're at that point. But at that point, we would have we've made contact with EPA. We'll have a complete data set to review. And then we'll have, I think, at least something to report back on where we think the EPA is likely to go or maybe willing to go once we submit our report.
John, do you have the date of when I believe we increased the pH. Do you remember when that was?
Vinny might know.
I don't have it in front of me, but I do have it all logged every time I've made an adjustment.
All right, so we can, if we can add that data so we can see if the pH was adjusted near the same time as maybe when the sulfide was switched? Because it seems like it might have been.
The pH was definitely increased before the sulfide was adjusted up.
So before the 1st of September-ish,
Yes.
in that time frame?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably around the middle of August, the first time I started going up on the pH.
Okay.
Okay. And what Peter's describing, for everyone's purposes, is ahead of the COMAG process, there's basically a flash tank. When you're adding iron, you target a pH level through the SCADA system to dose the ferric. Now that we're dosing aluminum, there is no impact on pH. So Vinny has been increasing the pH in that tank using the caustic to just see if any of that has positive or negative impact on the effluent.
Yeah, 'cause-
How's the turbidity been?
Well, that's the key parameter, and it's been good with the aluminum. It's been better with the aluminum than in the ferric, but we do notice that, and that's why we were kind of very, very concerned about the sulfide. Is as we increase the sulfide, we do see slightly increased turbidity.
John, can we increase the pH a little more?
I beg your pardon?
Can we increase the pH more?
Sure.
I mean, I think Vinny, you said you increased it to 7.0.
Yeah, effluent is right around 7.0 now, where before we were floating around a 6.8 at the beginning of the pilot.
Yeah.
So we're up 0.2 over where we were.
Now, to Peter's point, when you really want to work at metals precipitation, pH is a key part of that. Typically, if you can get the pH above 10.5, you'll pretty much precipitate out, you'll create similar hydroxides and precipitate out a significant amount of metals. That's typically how they do it in chemical manufacturing. That being said, we don't have the luxury of driving our pH up that high without then having to drive it back down in the effluent using some sort of acid downstream to, because you do have a pH limit on your final effluent. Interestingly enough, Pete, just as a sidebar, the town at our Sturbridge operation, we had a malfunction of our lime silo. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah.
And we, the lime discharged into the plant at a very high rate, and it actually brought the pH of the entire plant above 11. But interestingly enough, all the metals were like non-detect. So, of course, it killed the whole plant. Not that that's funny, but it was a uncontrollable event. But it just shows that pH does drive metals precipitation. But to your point, we have no problem raising that up incrementally.
So I guess as part of our report, maybe we can just reference that to Mr. Koopman that, we're trying not to change too many parameters at once. And now that we think we might have the pack dosing is hopefully on the high side, the sulfide dosing where we're kind of finding the sweet spot, and then we can start hopefully adjust pH up and maybe the pack down and try and find that sweet spot where kind of everything works well together.
I agree. I think what I'm hopeful is that we can present to EPA that the town of Charlton is investing in this solution. They're not just turning a blind eye to it. They're trying to craft a reasonable solution to this problem. And that goodwill hopefully results in maybe extending the pilot or the interim limit period, at least up until you get your draft permit.
How far out do you think that is, John?
Well, I think getting an answer on the interim limit would be relatively quickly. They moved pretty quickly on the administrative order when we asked. The draft permit, like Pete said, it's been in their hands since 2014. In the AO, they referenced that they anticipate it coming out, so they may already be working on it. We haven't heard that that's the case, but we'll certainly ask that question.
John, if we can't rectify the situation, can we go back to them and ask them to raise our limits?
Well, that would certainly be another avenue to take, is to have them demonstrate to you how these limits were developed, whether it was based on true water quality criteria? Or was it just based on historical? Sometimes when they issue you a limit, it's based on what you had done in the past. Every 5 years, you do a draft permit renewal where you basically give them all your data for the last 5 years. And then they look at that and they say, oh, well, they've been achieving this, so that'll be their new limit. Other times they will look at the water criteria and they'll say that based on the water body, this is what it can handle, so therefore this is what your limit needs to be. I don't know in this particular case what drove the zinc or copper or even aluminum. It may simply be that they looked at what you historically did and then made that your limit. Or it may be, like I said, some water criteria that they analyzed and developed. We should ask that question.
Yeah.
But when you start going down that road, I can just be candid. They tend to, want to, hold on to their territory. They're not going to just,
How do we compare to other towns as far as their limits?
I know your zinc limit is lower than Sturbridge, but again, a lot of that has to do with the water body that you discharge into and the sensitivity of it.
Yeah, because of the limited flow,
But like I said, I've seen in cases where they have issued permits and the justification for the limit was simply because that's the historical, that was your historical compliance. So then that becomes your limit.
So you mentioned getting together in another week. Is that when you're expecting data to be
Yes.
done and you need some feedback?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we sent the samples out on the 30th and we're just waiting. They typically take about 7 days to come back.
Peter, what's your thoughts?
I think it's a good way to go. As soon as I get that draft data from John, I'll share it with you guys for review as well. And we can just kind of put all of our thoughts together and forward them to John, and we can work them in and try and get that finalized to get it over to the EPA sooner than later. That way there we can get all of John's questions answered to see where we truly stand and if where our limits will be come October 31st.
Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't find the source, but, we tried, so we at least have that data.
Yeah, and like I said, that will be part of the draft report to the EPA or the study because we were required in the AO to do that. So I think we can certainly build some good tables. But I think when we look at it from a pounds perspective, it's going to be pretty clear that, eliminating, this source or that source would have minimal impact on the total influence of the treatment plant.
Yeah. Peter, are we going to be able to put some kind of a footnote onto that saying that, they were using certain products at the school system that were high in zinc?
I think we can tie it to that one high reading that was in over 1,000. I think that was pretty evident that we can tie it to when they were kind of doing their floor stripping during the summertime, and let them know that we followed up and had a conversation with the school that they can't necessarily do that anymore.
Yeah, I think that would be very important because, we get a 1,500 reading spike and then we got a 646, if I remember.
Yeah.
It's like we need to somehow explain that because now we're down to norms again.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that also shows that the level of effort and outcomes from, exploring the IPP portion of this pilot. So.
Yeah, I think the most important thing there is that we, have those graphs up to date and, Pete, you did a great job in putting those together on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate that.
Now, the other thing that's just, you might say, well, why did we wait so long? Or perhaps you may say, for the sulfide is unfortunately where we're applying the sulfide is inside the building. And it does have a somewhat of an effect on the air quality within the building.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm wondering, we're talking about a new SCADA unit tonight too, whether or not we just make it automated.
Yeah, I do think if we stick with this application, we'll likely need to do some sort of tank covering and then some sort of air scrubbing. at least from that general area around the sulfite addition.
Yeah, I worry about the sulfite levels and the H2S levels. I
Absolutely.
think he's totally on board with me on that. We've talked about it many times.
Right. You know, Sturbridge, unfortunately, or fortunately for them, they're able to you know, their system is outside and they're able to, you know, cover their tank completely. So they're not just faced with the same issues that we have. But I do think there's an opportunity to cover those tanks and then draw air out of it if this is ultimately the way we plan to go long term. Because it's all about air exchange. So, and then we can put that through like a little carbon canister or something to be able to strip it from getting out of the, you know, getting released into the atmosphere. Yeah. So again, just to recap. I should have all the data in this chart complete and the analysis, at least in draft form, over to Peter, hopefully by the end of this week for, you know, perhaps a follow-up discussion on Monday, if that's acceptable.
Very good. We'll be waiting.
Yeah, okay.
The only question I have is, do you need a few more days? Let's, you know, be realistic here.
No, I mean, I think we've been analyzing the data all along. It's just you know, getting those final results. And I think you know, I only need, well, I say we, me and Vinny only need a few days to at least reach it, you know, for the EPA to get back to us. I think a lot hinges on where their mindset is at this point. You know, we're certainly going to share with them kind of at least verbally where we're at, and we certainly have submitted the DMRs showing where the compliance has been over the last few months. So they're aware of the data, at least from the NIPD submittal perspectives.
Thank you so much for your data and your concepts.
No, I appreciate it. You know, I wish it was a lot easier and more bulletproof at this point, but we're continuing to work on it for sure.
Great company to have working for the town. We greatly appreciate it.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right, Pete, you got anything else for me? Do you need me to stay on or?
Only if you want to kind of participate in the SCADA discussion.
Oh, yeah, okay, absolutely.
Vinny's going to update the commission on what happened last week with SCADA and kind of what we need to do to figure it out and move forward. So, Vinny, if you're on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
So on Thursday, September 24th at about 8:30 at night, the SCADA PLC crashed. So the dial called out with a PLC failure. The operator called me, said, hey, I got this call for a PLC failure. I said, well, dial in and see how things look.
PLC means?
Excuse me?
PLC, what's the abbreviation mean?
It's a programmed control logic. It's basically the computer that gets all the inputs and sends all the output controls to the plant.
Interface?
It failed. Okay, got it.
Basically, the brains of the plant just went kaput.
So the operator dialed in, and the SCADA computer showed everything looking fine. There was nothing out of the ordinary when he dialed in. But he said at the same time, he also got a high level alarm. So we talked about it a little bit, and he said, I'm going to go in and just see what the high level was because it didn't give a description. It just said high level and PLC failure. So he came in and he's walking around checking the SCADA. Everything on the SCADA again looked normal. So he starts walking around the plant checking all the equipment. And when he got up back to where the secondary clarifiers were, they're empty. Those tanks should never be empty. They have constant flow all day, all night. So he called me right away and said, what should I do with this? So I told him, drag out. We have an emergency pump to pump the EQ tanks up to the back. I said, drag that pump out, get it going. I'm on my way. So he's dragging the pump out. I call him back and said, we got some bypass pumps in EQ tank 1. They bypass the lower tanks and pump everything right up to the back. I said, turn those pumps on so we can bypass it, and then we'll figure it out once I get here. So he got the bypasses going. He had the other pump set up before I even got here. I come in, first thing I did is went to SCADA. Again, everything on there looked normal. It's showing flow, which we didn't have. It's showing all the normal readings until I went into the trending. Peter, do you have that picture I sent you earlier today?
Yep.
Can you put that up on the screen?
Yep.
So when the PLC crashed, there's the straight lines right in the middle of that picture. That's what it did. Perfectly straight lines with no oscillation to them, and it should never look like that. So I called in LaFleur Electric. They're our troubleshooters when we have electrical issues. The electrician came in, me and him were going through a lot of things together trying to find what was causing it not to show up right. And we found a PLC with a fault registered on it. We pulled out the manuals and we figured out how to reload the software. So we reloaded the software and it started back up and ran. Now, since that happened, we've had those straight lines 2 more times. So we were lucky the first time this crash happened, it was at night. There's almost no flow at night. It's easy to control. But we still had to run everything in hand and watch the tanks. If this would have happened on like a Saturday afternoon, right after the operator left, I mean, it could have been a big sewage release to the environment. So I think this is a critical component we need to get addressed as soon as possible. I've been in touch with Harbor Controls. They're the programming company, and they build a lot of these PLCs. They put all the components together and program them. And he's part of the upgrade for the Blois project. And he said he should be out here sometime next week or the week after to finish the blower project. And at that time, he's going to look around the plant and see what we need to get our SCADA up to date. So,
Yeah, and there's a history with that, and no, I don't think even you, Peter, were here. The way the SCADA, the PLCs work within that main cabinet is there's a master and a basically a, you know, I know sensitive times you can't use certain terms, but there's like a lead computer and a backup computer, and they constantly talk to each other. And they share information, and that information then gets sent to SCADA. There is one, the main one that's an Allen Bradley is relatively new, and the old one that's like original equipment, right, Vinny?
yes.
And it's always been that older, antiquated one that, you know, is on borrowed time. If you, it's basically an old computer, and I think it's just finally gotten to the point at which it's starting to fail. And needs to be updated to a more modern PLC.
What's the bottom line cost on that?
We won't know until the Paul from Harbor Controls comes out, figures out what it's going to be, how much the replacement part is, and then how much for him to program it as well. His cost to come in and program the new SCADA equipment and for the EQ tank blower upgrade is $26,000. So now that cost is covered by the grant, but the cost to upgrade the SCADA PLC and maybe clean up some other stuff and get our SCADA system up to date and current and protected, it's going to be a big ticket item. So just kind of forewarning you, but we won't have that. I don't even want to throw a number out there until Paul comes out, looks at it, and gets us an estimate.
Peter, can we do that as a committee without having to go through the finance committee and everything else, or can we vote for that regardless of the cost as an emergency situation?
So we still have quite a bit of funding between our maintenance and equipment line item and our capital equipment line item that we could fund hopefully most of this. And if we find ourselves running short towards the end of the year, we can always transfer more in from stabilization to replenish some of that at the annual town meeting, depending on what the cost is.
Okay, so now in the annual town meeting, it looks like we got a ton of money going into our stabilization fund, the Water and Sewer Commission. Can we
Yes.
use that, or does it go through the finance committee?
It has to be appropriated to our budget. That's what controls how much money you can spend annually is the operating budget that gets approved in the beginning of the year. If we had a set amount from Paul already and it was X dollars and you approved it, we could transfer that money now. But I don't want to request a transfer for an unknown value at this point.
Well, I think you're talking about 120 to 150,000 dollars.
Yeah, and then the finance committee also carries what they call, they have their own reserve fund that they keep annually, that if we needed some additional money that we don't have appropriated at the time, we could ask them. They would kind of let us borrow that, and we would get that money appropriated at the annual town meeting to reimburse them that cost.
Well, if we're talking about bringing somebody in to reprogram this thing for $26,000, then my personal opinion is, let's rip out the whole system, okay, put in a new SCADA system, make it scalable so that it can actually deliver the chemicals that, Vinny's putting in by hand half the time, okay, and some of his other people, and, make it so that we can really get into the 21st century here instead of, the 19th century.
We could do that. If you guys wanted to vote tonight to do that, we could, as we're going to be talking later, we could make the request to town meeting to fund the SCADA upgrade from our retained earnings and still transfer the money into our stabilization. And that way there we have funding for that project as well.
Okay, so that's 6 months out though. That's in June.
No,
Okay.
no, the special town meeting, the one that's coming up next week.
Well, then let's get it on the docket. Okay, that's my own feeling.
Okay, that's up to you. I can make that request, and if you want to estimate a cost, we can do that. And
John,
go from
what's your expectation of a cost of a new SCADA system that's scalable?
Well, we've done, I would say in the last 3 years, I've done 3 of them. One at a membrane treatment plant, much more complicated, much more involved in terms of the number of man hours associated with writing the logic and the code to program the PLC. And that was roughly about $600,000. We just did one in North Haven, Connecticut, which was roughly about $300,000. But again, in both cases, the one in Reading was a complete, they gutted everything and brought all new, they were all on analog, they weren't on digital. I would guess that you're somewhere around 100 to 150 max, I would say, to basically put in 2 PLCs and bring over all of the IOs.
Yeah, and then we need to make it so it's a scalable system so that it can deliver other chemicals in the future if we need to, and add-ons.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
that's the
why
beauty of the Allen Bradwell. I don't know what
research.
PLCs you go with, but once you get the right PLCs, you'll be able to put modules on, and it'll be extremely expandable. I think, and to Peter's point, you get the new SCADA nodes because you've got the PLCs which are taking in all the IOs, and they're feeding the SCADA computers which are running the SCADA software, which is really like just the graphics basically and the trending as Vinny described.
We also want a system that has also the probes that are doing all the different chemical aspects of this too. So I think that's going to add another 30,000. So I think you're talking 100.
Yeah, if you want to include the instrumentation out in the field, the field instruments reporting to the PLC.
Absolutely. That's the only way to go. I mean, let's if you're going to do it right. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it makes sense because particularly even on the SCADA side, when you're dealing with computers now, I mean, they're already up to Windows 10 now. So a lot of times what's going to happen with the SCADA computers, the software could run forever, but the Windows that its operating system it's on is what is no longer supported and therefore becomes the obsolescence part.
Absolutely.
So getting new
So-
machines up to Windows 10 and getting the most recent releases of the software and then migrating all of those graphics in, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, what are you talking for creating custom algorithms also though, for the different products that we're adding in? That's probably another 20,000 there.
Yeah, really, that gets, it's man hours. I mean, that's where Harbor Controls makes all their money. It's the number of man hours it takes to basically land those IOs in the PLC and then bring that into the SCADA to be able to describe the screen that you want to see. And now I'm hopeful that when Harbor Controls gets in there, look, he's going to be able to keep a lot of the existing, infrastructure and just upload it to the most recent version of the software. But he shouldn't have to create all new screens for COMAG. He shouldn't have to complete all new screens. He should just be able to bring the IOs into the PLC and then make sure that the PLC is, when it says, this is what this is, that SCADA reads it correctly. And that's just time testing and running.
So John, just to kind of explain that real quick, when you talk about the IOs, you're talking about input outputs, right?
Right.
So we have a sensor, say we have a pH probe sitting somewhere in the plant
Mhm.
that has, what is it, 420 millivolt single that gets fed into that PLC.
Correct.
And that PLC then interprets that signal it gets from 4 to 20 millivolts to
Correct.
interprets, then takes that and turns it into the pH reading that Vinny will see on the SCADA screen at that specific point.
Correct.
And then in turn, SCADA can take that pH, hopefully we get far enough to do this, and adjust the chemical feed pump so that it can adjust how much chemical, it'll change how much chemical is being inputted at a certain point to adjust that pH automatically.
And that's the C in that PLC. That's the controller portion. So the
So,
PLC is programmed logic controller. So it basically can be programmed to take an input and output and make a change to an instrument or a
So
pump.
the EQ tank upgrade that we have going on now, currently the blowers blow into a diffuser at the bottom of these EQ tanks, and the motors run 100% 24/7.
Mhm.
What we're changing to is we're going to install a DO probe, and that's going to get fed into SCADA. We're going to set the parameter that we want that DO probe to read, and then the SCADA will adjust the VFD that controls the electric motor for the blower to either go up or down based on the DO reading that we're getting to save us electricity.
Well, it depends. I don't know off the top of my exactly how that package looks, Pete, but I believe the DO is going to go into the PLC that's out there. That PLC is programmed to do just what you said and then send what it's doing to SCADA. Now, SCADA can then just see it and report it, or it can then be programmed to send back changes to the PLC. In other words, SCADA can simply be just view, right? I'm just watching what's happening. I'm not really doing anything but telling you what the PLC is doing. Or it can actually be set up so we can actually adjust the PLC set points. But the PLC is truly what does all the controlling. And it's really just a solid state, piece of equipment, box, computer just out at the tank. And in this case, the two PLCs that are controlling everything in the plant are located inside that control panel in the lab.
So how old are those, Peter? Do you know?
Very.
The ones in the lab, I have no idea.
So I think if we don't know how old they are, then let's just look at upgrading the whole damn system is my feeling. Okay? Spend the money. It's short to long term, because if we have what they suggested on a Saturday night, we crash and then we just end up sending everything downstream. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah. See, and the reason Vinny, saw that the screen, when he called into SCADA and SCADA was showing what it should, because again, SCADA is just getting the information from the PLC. So if the PLC is frozen, the SCADA is looking at the very last thing it saw and showing you that. And it's only going to update SCADA when the PLC gives it more information. And that's what happened with, in this case. So the PLC is what went down, but SCADA didn't know it was down. It just was getting a signal of, straight, the pH is 7.2 and it never changed. So it just gave a nice straight line.
Right, so here, John, the PLC takes the input from the level sensors in the EQ tank and tells the pumps whether to turn on or not, correct?
Correct. And
And
then it
that's
sends
why-
that info to SCADA for SCADA to graphically represent,
Yeah.
you know, a graphic basically, you know.
So when that PLC went down, it never told the EQ pumps to turn on and pump that, the sewerage coming in up to the
Correct.
diversion structure
It
to send
actually-
it through the plant.
It actually turned off all of its outputs. So all of the outputs froze in the off position. So there were no chemicals pumping, no EQ tanks pumping, nothing. So I mean,
Peter, if you have the choice right now, because I'm severely, okay, on the side of just upgrading the whole system from A to Z. What's your thoughts?
I think it's a great investment to make.
Then
Yeah,
let's do it.
the only downside is you're spending money. Other than that, as far as Veolia, they're probably gonna be ecstatic, because all of a sudden, they're gonna have much more control, much more automation, everything at their fingertips to continue to make improvements to the plant. So the nice thing
Well,
about
that
Veolia,
was my thought too. We're gonna save money in the long term with Veola, okay, because they're not gonna have to be sending people out to do all these little things on the weekends or extra time. And a lot of it could be automated, even if we have to spend an extra $100,000 to get some of these additional
Right.
chemicals to be dropped in. In the
But-
end, we're joining the 21st century. I think we're back 20 years or 30 years ago in technology.
but one of the other benefits to do it now, again, while Veolia is here, in case something funny happens next year, not to, hope anything or hope things change, but you're in your last 1-year contract with Veolia and we're gonna have to put this back out to bid. Right now, for you to buy Hawk products through Veolia, you get to buy that at a severe discount. So
Then let's-
so just talking
Let's
about
do
the DO probes that we're using for the EQ tanks, the company that's doing the upgrade costed those out for them to purchase. I think there's 6 of them, and their cost through Hawk was about $26,000. I believe
I remember
Veolia's
that.
cost
Yeah.
was less than 10.
it was 7,000 for everything.
So if we
Yeah.
can go ahead and just piggyback everything together, I know you're looking at a big number, but I think what you can get for that number will never be less expensive moving forward. And
So
Well,
what
I
is-
think
what
we're
is- Number right now, is that number 200?
200.
I think 200 would be a maximum that hopefully we wouldn't come close to hit. But again, I think 200 is a target, yes. That a
Okay,
lot
so
of
We have an awful lot of legwork to do prior to actually spending that money. But in order to be able to spend that money when we need to appropriate that money and get that money
Yes.
in the works now. That's at this town meeting. So I guess a motion in the effect of that is what we're looking for at this point in time.
Yeah, Russ, I would say that I've already researched this over the last 3 days, okay, since SCADA unit
Yep.
went down. Okay? It's $120,000 minimum for a SCADA unit, okay? Additional probes, another $40,000, okay? Programming and algorithms are another $20,000. You're talking $108,000 minimum, okay? You want to add extras in so it can drop chemicals in the future, you're up to 200.
Okay. Well, like I
So,
say, I'm all in favor of voting to appropriate the money at this point in time. I think the discussion of actual spending is more involved and comes later.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line is that, we got John and Vinny who know what the hell they're doing online, as Peter said. Okay, we got Viola who's getting us incredible pricing. Let's take advantage of what we got in front of us.
Dave, Paul, how do you guys?
Yeah, I mean,
Chime in on this.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think we should need to appropriate the money, and I think we need to have further discussions to, just so we know what
Yep.
we're purchasing.
So if that's the case, I'd ask that you make a motion to transfer $200,000 from retained earnings to sewer capital for a SCADA upgrade.
Motion to provide for $200,000 for a SCADA upgrade. Okay. Anything else needed, Peter?
Yeah, from sewer retained earnings.
From SOAR retained earnings.
You have a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Is there
And then
any further? Paul, are you still with us?
Oh, I'm on board with you.
So again, just to be clear, Mr. Chair, this is the appropriation for the funding for the upgrade. It doesn't necessarily mean that all that money will get spent until you approve what the project actually looks like.
Correct.
Yes. Do we need to put that in the motion, Peter?
No,
Okay.
I mean, no, I don't believe so, because again, I can't spend it without your approval. I can't go and enter into any type of contract with someone to perform that type of work without your approval. So you definitely have, you still have
Peter,
authority.
Peter, the only other question is, so we're talking about somebody coming out and reprogramming this thing for $20,000. I mean, you know, what are we looking at for, you know, them to come out and deal with this as a interim thing? Do we have to include that in the expense or not?
No, we'll get the feel for that when Paul comes out to do his initial review and see what he says. He's not the only person who can do this work, so I think until he comes out and gets us that proposal, or you know, he's familiar with it. So until he gets us that proposal, I don't think we need anything else, and we still have funding in our FY21 capital line item if we have to do anything in the immediate future where we don't want to touch this 200,000.
That sounds reasonable to me. I just think that we just need to get on board with it and get on moving forward to the new world, as they say.
Okay.
Well, let's put it to a roll call vote.
All right, Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Cantwell,
Aye.
and Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
All right, I'll forward this over to the town administrator and the finance director tomorrow. Ask them to add this to their to the town warrant motion, so it will get acted on next Tuesday, the 13th.
Can language be added to it saying that we have an antiquated system, okay, that is failing and could cost the town?
That won't be added to the motion. No, I'll get up and speak to that point and explain why we're requesting the funds.
I think that would be greatly appreciated, Peter. Thank you so much for your expertise. And John, thank you so much. And Vinny, as always, on top of it.
Yes,
We
thank you,
appreciate the
gentlemen.
support.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, moving forward on to else. Peter, you said that they are not participating this evening.
Correct. I got a phone call from Garrett today stating he's not going to be able to attend tonight, and he asked to get put on our next meeting, whether that's going to be in the beginning of November or later on this month. So.
Yep.
Given
Okay.
Peter, given that we need another month's worth of data, I think that was very smart, actually, quite honestly.
Yeah, so again, we'll wait and see what we get for data from him before our next meeting, and hopefully we get, he presents a nice packet for you to review.
Very good. So moving on to water and sewer construction standards.
Yes, I know we probably had this discussion about a year ago. We have water and sewer bylaws, but we don't necessarily have construction standards that spell out to contractors or engineers looking to design potential water and sewer mains in town, what our actual construction standards are. So I looked around at different communities trying to figure out, you know, what I can take from here and take from there to get something together that that's uniform and makes sense. And what I presented to you comes from the town of Framingham. They have the most probably cohesive water and sewer construction standards. In their standards, in their construction standards, they also have roads, drainage, all sorts of stuff that I actually removed because we don't have authority over it anyways. But as far as water and sewer goes, I did try and update these to reflect Charlton, made some minor changes here and there, and just wanted to present them to you for your initial review, get some initial comments, and see what else might need to be made for changes, and try and get this buttoned up. So as we move forward and we have contractors calling or design engineers calling saying, what are your construction standards? We can just, tell them to look online, download the PDF, and everything will be right there for them to see.
Yeah, as I discussed with you earlier today, Peter, I got about halfway through these, and I would like more time on it myself just to be able to get fully through this before accepting them. But from what I've seen, I have no issue with it.
And again, if you guys see something or if something is missing that you want to see pertain to Charlton, we can add, we can delete, we can change. And then once we adopt them, as we start to use them, if we find that it's missing something or it needs additional stuff here or there, those changes can be made at any meeting. So these are not necessarily bylaws, but they're standards. So our water and sewer bylaws will still be in effect. This will just be a set of standards underneath those bylaws.
Peter, I was wondering about whether we should just integrate the bylaws into this situation and just, make it one uniform document.
Yeah, if you do, the only way to do that would be to go to town meeting and ask them to add these standards to our bylaws. And then any changes after that would have to be done at town meeting as well.
I'm learning a little bit here.
That would pose the problem for me, Phil, because any changes we want to make in the future would just have to go on the town hall floor constantly. And if it's just some simple request, it gets very complicated, I think.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. Okay, and I see now where Peter's coming from. One of the things that I did notice in that document, Russ, was just basically the definition of inspector. Okay, and I sent Peter off a quick email today. Maybe he can share that with you. But I think that we have to define what inspector is, because the town of Framingham, which I grew up in with, by the way, I spent 40 years there, or 28. Okay, the bottom line is on it is they have their own DPW. It's
Yep.
integrated system, and they have their own town engineers and their own inspectional service. So we have to define what's an inspector. And I think we could do one of two things. We can define it in language, or we can define it in that, okay, we do the same thing as water installers in the town, which say, okay, I want to be an inspector for the town of Charlton, and we certify them, and you're an inspector.
Sure.
So if we go that route of having, say, contractors who are inspectors, how do they get compensated, Phil, in Framingham?
Well, in Framingham, what they're doing is they have their own town engineering system, okay?
Right.
They have 2 town engineers. They have their own DPW inspectors who are certified. They don't use outside people.
So what I tried to keep it simple here, just to give us the most kind of leeway, is wherever it said DPW director, town of Framingham, wherever there was authority in these, I tried to put the Charlton Water Sewer Commission. And in the glossary for definition of the Charlton Water Sewer Commission, or the CWSC, I put Charlton Water Sewer Commission or its designee. that way there, as times change or as you grow, but like right now, it could be yourself for certain approvals, or you could designate it to be the superintendent, or you could designate it to be the resident engineer who might be overseeing a contract. But you can make that designee who you choose depending on the project that's taken place.
Correct, except if it's emergent. That's some of the language that I sent out you today. Did you get that to see?
I did. I'll pull it up right now.
Okay. Maybe that can be shared.
Yep, it's right here. Right, so again, yeah, so the inspector should be defined as an individual qualified with certification or licensure or significant experience in the area of inspecting similar projects. In all cases, it being an individual or corporation. An individual or corporation may make a request to the Charlton Water Sewer Commission to be on an established list of inspectors, given that they fulfill the requirements and have full understanding of regulations pertaining to the project they are inspecting, and the Charlton Water Sewer Commission requirements laid out in this document. To be defined as in Charlton Water Sewer Commission approved inspector, the final judgment of qualified will be determined by the superintendent of the Charlton Water Sewer Commission or the Charlton Water Sewer Commission. Special circumstances may be approved by the superintendent of the CWSC or the CWSC Commission, especially in an emergent situation. A designee may be appointed by the CWSC chair or assistant chair of commission or superintendent to be an inspector, or a person working under the CWSC contract may act as an inspector in this circumstance.
All right, sounds like I'm gonna designate you as an inspector, Phil.
I think you have a little more experience than I do. Sorry. I've come up to
I'm always
the.
available. You can call me anytime if you have any questions.
Nice, very nice. Peter, what did you think of the language?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there. I'm not sure about the corporation. When you say corporation, are you talking about like saying the resident engineer?
Nuclear engineering. Okay, so change the word to whatever you want to, but it's, what we need to do is say the corporation who comes on to bid on a line, okay, they can designate their own people, but they're still responsible.
Okay.
I like the language. I think it's very inclusive, and I do like it.
Yeah, so I can add that into the glossary, definitely.
Yep.
I'm not a lawyer, but I certainly try to come up to the fray of what's going to cover the concepts.
Yeah, you've done a good job on this one.
So again, as you review it, and if you have any other comments or anything else you'd like to have changed, let me know. I'll put them in the document. I'll redline it so as everyone reviews it, they'll be able to see what's been changed. And then we can maybe try and adopt it at our next meeting.
The only other additional line would be that, okay, these standards are not exclusive of the bylaws of the town of Charlton, period.
I thought I put that in there somewhere. Under, general in the preamble, these standards are meant to work congruently with the adopted water and sewer bylaws. At no time shall these standards supersede or replace the water and sewer bylaws.
Town of Charlton's bylaws.
Yep, okay.
Because you might run into plumbing, highway, lots of other issues. Because, I mean, what happens is what you put out there might not be an exact format of what is expected by the Highway Commission. So what happens is, we have to figure out which one supersedes which, so that's just another thought.
No, I'll definitely add Charlton there so it spells it out.
Yeah. So, okay, Peter, you did a phenomenal job. I don't know how many hours you must have put into that.
There's a couple.
A couple, yeah, like 30.
No, it wasn't that bad, luckily.
Well, you're better than I am, that's for sure.
Thank you. So, we're good. We'll continue to work on those and try and get them cleaned up and ready for your next meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Peter and Sue. All right. So moving forward, request from Albany Brothers.
Yeah, so Albanese Brothers, some of the excess material that they removed from the trench for the water line, most of it they brought to the highway barn, the excess material, and pushed it over and left it there for Jerry. They did take a pile to their lot and they processed it. They processed it into probably say 2 to 6 inch stone, 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch stone, and then a pile of sand that they wanted to use to bed the pipe for their service connections that they're going to be doing to the homes. Because in the agreement, because of their contract with ExxonMobil, it says any excess material will go to the town of Charlton. They're looking for your approval to use that processed material to bed the pipe for the service connections, to use that sand that they processed.
They're gonna pay for that, right?
They're going to pay us for it.
Right.
Well, they had to there's a cost they incurred to process it. The Otto Albanese, one of the owners, said that the stone, there's, like I said, there's 3/4, there's 2 piles there, 3/4 to 2 inch stone, and then the larger rock. He said those piles would probably get brought over to the highway department because he doesn't have any need for those when the project is done. But the sand he was hoping to be able to use. So no, there's been no talk of him paying us for it.
So
What's that
they've made several products, and they're looking to use one of several products, and the other products they're thinking they're going to give to the highway department.
That's what he said, yes.
Okay. So if that's indeed the way it's going to work out, then I wouldn't have any issue with that myself, seeing as how they're going to get one of the products, the highway department's going to get some of the other products.
Right.
So,
I think that's a fair exchange because it was only a raw product. If they didn't process it and screen it, it'd just be filled, dumped over the bank, and this way maybe we could get some benefit from the stone.
correct. The stone, if you add that into your motion, if you make a motion to approve this and state in your motion that the excess stone that was processed goes to the highway department, then yeah, I'll make sure that happens.
All right, I'd like to make a motion as stated by Peter.
Second the emotion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Roll
Go to
call
a vote.
vote. Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Cantwell,
Aye.
and Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
All right, thank you. I'll forward that information to Otto tomorrow and make sure that excess material, the processed stone, gets brought over to the highway department.
Perfect.
Peter, you're all set on that $200,000 on the previous motion, right?
Yes, I should be. Yeah, again, we can discuss that some more when we get down our agenda and start talking about the special town meeting for the water and sewer retained earnings. But yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
It's kind of late in the date. Are we going to make the warrant?
So a motion like this, you can actually vote to amend the motion on town meeting floor and add or delete stuff at any time. So as long as it falls under the initial explanation of the warrant article, you can make any changes up to the time of the vote. So because we have the funds in retained earnings, because this is a project that you approved unanimously, there shouldn't be any problems adding this to the agenda. But that'll be the first thing I do tomorrow morning. Like I said, I'll forward this to the town administrator and the finance director. And
We've already since had that placeholder there.
One of the great advantages of having the number of hours of experience you have in the town, Peter. Thank you so much again for your knowledge.
Sure.
All right, Peter, what about the Buffinville Public Water Supply?
All right, so we have a couple of things to talk about for the Buffinville property and the public water supply process. I've been working with Beta to prepare the FY21 scope of work to submit to the DEP for the $200,000 grant, that the additional funding they gave us FY21. Now FY21 goes from July 1st of 2020 to June 30th of 2021. So we're already 3 months into FY21. The reason we really haven't been able to work on that scope of work yet is because the FY20 grant was extended through October 31st of 2020. So we're still trying to get work done under that grant because a lot of stuff got postponed due to COVID. So under the FY20 grant, we're trying to finalize the site plan for submittal to the planning board and conservation, and using the FY20 funding for that, which we have enough. So as far as that site plan goes, let me try and bring that up. So I believe we looked at this access road and site plan that's going to be presented probably maybe 4 to 6 weeks, a couple meetings ago. So this shows, this is Gale Road. Down here, this shape, this is the well field that's going to be proposed. It shows, you can kind of see the wells that were drilled, the preliminary wells. The thought is that we're going to do 5 wells here in the W shape almost in this area. And in this area, where the well field is proposed, the elevation was quite high. So we're going to be cutting the top of this hill down approximately 20 feet. So doing a site plan for that to allow us to change the grade of the land that much. There is some drainage work that needs to be done. And then we're looking at the access road here that's going to come in from Gale Road. So there's going to be quite a bit of cuts and fills in this area to get this access road here. There is going to be some drainage work that needs to be done. But the layout of the road pretty much keeps us out of any of the major conservation areas that we shouldn't have to go into. So it really shouldn't give us much of a headache. We're showing a possible pump station treatment plant pad up here near the roadway. And we're also showing a staging area during construction to allow us to bring material in or out and kind of stage it before if we have to. So this is
as mentioned before, Peter, we need to move that pump station back away from that house, and we need to move the staging area back.
Okay.
It just, you're living there as a resident, you have a pump station, 100 feet behind your house. It's not realistic, okay, when we can just move it down 150 feet, 250 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned that once before. We had talked about it, but it's not fair to a property owner who's spent $300,000, $400,000 on a house.
No, understood. Good point. I'll make sure that gets changed. Are there any other initial comments or concerns?
Yeah, there is a couple concerns. Okay. You had mentioned that we might not be able to get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on board with going across Gale Road and putting a bridge across, their property. Where's that at this point in the negotiations?
That point is we're still trying to get this finalized first before we move on to that part.
I can't agree with that. I think we need to know where the line's going, okay, where it's coming out, what the cost of that's going to be, whether we have to go through Oxford and come around, which is going to add about $2 million to the project probably by the time we get finished putting a line in. I need to know those factors before we go forward, okay? Yeah, I think we can spend the grant we have to, fulfill it, but I would much rather see if we can divert that money to other parts of town for drilling than this project, this site, which has a lot of difficulties with it, okay, unless we can get, as you said, what is it, Congressman Neal on board with us?
Yes.
Okay, so the bottom line is on this site, I think it's a dead issue until we get where that line is going to run. I really do. I think it's over and done. I think we should put our issue into becoming a consolidated water system with the town of Southbridge instead of spending hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s, which were done back in 2003. We spent $300,000 already on this. And we could spend that money for much better usage on expanding our water and storage system down Route 20 to get more businesses going.
Okay.
Just my thought.
No, those are good points.
By the time we get finished, we spend $500,000, we get nowhere, and, we could spend $500,000 on water lines and when Flint Road up, bring the loop around and attach to the current line from Southbridge, and my question is, where are we with the new head of the town of Southbridge? As far as, we're talking about negotiations there. Where are we there?
I'm still waiting for the DPW director to get back to me to set that meeting up.
Well, I think that's crucial before we move forward on anything.
No, I am on that.
I never hesitate to consider new direction, Phil. I myself, having only been on the commission a few years, came on asking a lot of the same questions that you did. And I still ask those questions. I think that at this point in time with the Bufferville project, the direction of where the water line is headed physically across the dam and across Army Corps property being the big question of will Army Corps go along with it? I think part of that answer is the fact of them themselves wanting access to the water line to solve the problem that they have of their water issue on their Army Corps property.
So what is Peter asked that question, Peter?
I'm sorry, what question?
Well, I guess that question is supplying water to their building that they have the bad water at over on the beach side.
Yes. Yep.
And that is where they have expressed the interest of tapping off of the water line.
Yes. So what we did was Beta drew up this proposed water line. It is showing, correct?
Yes, it's showing.
All right. So if you look up to the top left, you'll see in the light blue here is our current infrastructure that's just got installed as part of the school loop. So what we did was we proposed, and down here on the bottom right is just a general area of where the well field might be, pump station, coming out to Gale Road, coming across the spillway, again on the proposed footbridge, There's their access road here, their road that goes into their office. And then right about up here, we come off of the road and come onto this portion of their property and try and go cross lots up to Oxford Road. I asked Beta to present this to the Army Corps of Engineers, and Kendra Martin said that their initial, it wasn't a hard no, they just had concerns about the water line in this area because they have tow drains coming off of the dam that they were concerned about. So again, in my discussion, it's not that it's all, I just don't want everyone to think that this is warm and that we got a warm and fuzzy feeling and this isn't going to be an issue. This is something that we're going to have to kind of move forward and address also. All I was trying to do was I wanted to get the site plan a little further along and get that finalized and then move on to working with the Army Corps to finalize some of this.
To sort of stop you there, Peter, to also say, right now, currently, we're spending grant money that's already been appropriated for this project. We're not spending money. We're not seeking new money. So at this point in time, Phil, we've already got the money in the system to spend it. If we don't, we lose that grant money towards the spending.
Okay, so the question there is, Peter, the grant money that we got, okay, so we got grant money through 1031, okay?
Yes. Yep.
Then we have a new grant where we're asking them whether they'll allow us to do drilling in other parts of the town, correct?
No, we have not. We have not put that forward to do drilling. And
So what do we got left? So what do we got left in the grant? We add the I think was it 227 for the next year? I forget.
200.
200. Okay. So we got 200 and we got how much left in this year's spending?
They've given us 200 for next year, and we haven't put a price together on what we're going to even request that yet. I'm trying to just find the FY20 scope of service that was approved.
Yeah, I think it was 37. I think we already spent like 100 of it. I think we got like 37K left.
No, the FY20 appropriation was also 200,000. It's been 200,000 a year for the last 3 years. We just haven't spent all of it over the last 3 years, every year.
But as far as the site plan itself goes, the site plan is just the general plan to give us access to those well fields and to develop out that property, which doesn't have to be done. But under our grant spending, we have to complete the site plan at this point in time, submit it to the planning board, conservation, get those approvals. Once it's in place, it's approved. It's still not work that's going to be done. It's work that can be done at that point in time. But it will be approved and paid for under the grant. You get what I'm saying, Phil?
Oh, I understand 100%, Lee, but I'm also wondering whether that grant could be spent on, finding other wells in town, okay, other areas. Because I think, unless, Peter, you were exploring the concept of going along the easement of the pipeline that's already there. Any luck there?
I haven't been told no yet, Phil. I got bounced around to 4 different people pretty quickly via email. And I haven't heard back from the last person I got bounced to yet.
Well, you're doing better than I did.
So I haven't been told no yet. So I'm gonna try and be the eternal optimist on that. So
okay, well, yeah,
but all of that doesn't change the access road to the property and what we're looking to potentially permit and be able to do. Not necessarily.
So the question there, Peter, would be if, say that we can't use this land, is that land sellable as a lot, as a back lot or not?
So, sorry, I'm just looking. So.
I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm just wondering what the town. That's a question that doesn't have to be answered tonight, but it's something that.
No,
should be open.
I have an answer. I'm just trying to look to get to a map that shows everything that is easy to reference. So the Phillips property, which is in this area where the well field is, was purchased with a 50% grant from the state. That grant forced us to classify this and put it in conservation. So this can never be sold from the town because it's there for a public water supply in the future. This portion here that we bought from the Burns that gets us access to Gale Road was a separate purchase that we paid for completely with our funding. If you wanted to, you could take this parcel and sell that.
We believe, Phil, when we purchased the property that we could in fact do that, turn around and sell the property for more than we paid and get the town back their money, and the investment would never be a negative situation or a burden on the town. If we so decided to say, okay, we're going to scrap this project and just sell the property, we felt we could sell it at a win.
Right. Well, conservation land
Not all-
under the budget of the town of Charlton do allow you to change it into other usages. It just has to go through a source. I've already looked at the regs on that. That conservation land could be changed if necessary.
I don't believe so, Phil, because of the restriction the state put on it because we got funding from them for the grant.
Now there's another piece that comes with it, Peter, that
Yes.
I didn't have. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the rules on the town of Charlton.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's not a straight, the town didn't just put a conservation restriction on it. Again, because we got reimbursed 50% of the purchase price from the state, they put a restriction on it as well, that it could never be developed in the future.
I now understand. I think that we need to do two things. One, explore whether that new grant can be used for drilling wells that we're discussing in the northern side of, or other parts of Charlton that are available to us, okay? And that's one thing. And if they can't, then we go forward with this project the way it is. I just think that from whatever I've seen on this project, okay, we're talking about lateral drilling, we're talking about can we get things. Now, in my exploration of the laws, we should be going right now to the federal government and saying we want an exclusion on this, okay, based on business, okay, expansion on Route 20, that we need a source of water, okay? And the laws changed under the Trump administration, under the EPA, allow us great leeway there. And I think we should be going right after the federal government right now, okay, saying that we want to use this zone for that purpose, and we will then override the U.S. Commission there for the Buffalo Reservoir and just get on with it, you know? But until we get something more, I think this is, you know, just spending more money for what?
Well, the only problem in all of that, Phil, is that at this point in time, we don't have anything. We always looked at Buffinville, at this site in particular, as something potentially we could have in our back pocket. Are we going to ever break it out and use it? That's a very good question. And as we've just discussed, and as we've discussed in the past a lot, there's an awful lot of funding and a lot of what ifs to get the water from that site to our pipes. But
$200,000 is a like proverbial drop in the bucket from what it's going to cost to get that to Route 20, which we want to do, okay? And so if that project is not going to come fruition, okay, and we're not going to get the ability to pipe it, I think at this point we need to ask two things. Can we go through can Charlton go through Oxford? Okay, that should be the first question. Second, can we go through the conservation land there or the Buffin Reservoir, under it, over it, on the ground, whatever. But until we get to that point, I'm not in favor in spending a whole lot of more money, okay? And I think we should take a look at that $200,000 and see if we can spend it on finding other areas in town. I just think this is one of those issues that the engineers are going to spend lots of money on, and we're just going to end up with a dry hole.
So just to talk about funding a little bit and kind of why we've been moving forward this way, I guess partially is probably, I think maybe 2016, when the Casella Loop was happening and there was all sorts of other discussions going on. Before my time, there was reference to a $6 million bond bill that the Mass DEP set aside to help the town of Charlton get water, to fund us for water. Correct, Paul? Do you recollect that?
There was $6 million. I don't know that it was exclusive to the town of Charlton. I think it may have had to be shared with some other towns, but I'm not sure about that.
So from that bond bill, the DEP took 1 million of that to put towards the Casella project that took place on Berry Corner Road. I believe the funding that they've been giving us now, this $200,000 that is coming through as a grant per se, it might be coming from that bond bill because I've seen at a couple of the maybe water trainings or the seminars I've been to, that Marty Suberg has been there, the director of the DEP, and I try and kind of corner him once a year, to thank him for the funding and just kind of talk about that bond bill. And the remainder of that bond bill is there to help hopefully for us to use to install the water mains that are going to be needed to get us from this site to either our existing system or out to Route 20 or wherever we decide to get it to go, whichever route we decide to make it happen. So I think there's still funds sitting there for that portion of the project, Phil, and maybe that's why one of the reasons we've been moving forward maybe more aggressively at this site, knowing that there's going to be a large cost at the end of it, because there is some of that funding there. Now, there was also another transportation grant, Mass Business Development grant that we received to extend the water line from Oxford to our infrastructure in Charlton on Route 20. And that was about $2.4 million to get that done.
Yeah, but we couldn't do that because of the watershed issue.
Correct. No, it wasn't watershed. The town of Oxford, the Aquarian Water Company said they didn't have enough water to supply us with the water. But when they took that, they left that grant available for as long as they could. And when they finally pulled that back, they knew about this project we had going at Buffinville. And one of the reasons they let us keep that grant for as long as they did is to see where we were going with this and see if we could make it happen sooner than later, so we could transfer the use of those funds to help us with this as well. And when they took that back in the letter where they take that grant back, they say to reapply pretty much when this project is completed. So there may be additional funds from there as well to get water to that portion of Route 20 that you keep referencing out on the eastern portion of town. So between those two possible supplies of money, we might be looking at $7 to $7.5 million to fund the water line getting from this site to our current infrastructure.
Well, and under those circumstances, then, spending the money that we don't have to spend because it's a grant makes sense doing the beta project. But I certainly think two things. One, we need to find a direction we're going to go, a firm direction with the Army Corps of Engineers, okay, or with the town of Oxford, which way we're going to go, okay? And I think we need to do that within the next 2 to 3 months.
So again, I guess my priority was to get the site plan done, get that in front of planning board and conservation, make sure there are no concerns there. before, I just want to get that done before I take that next step. And then when we start talking about FY21 and the funds set aside there, we can take this site plan after it's approved and maybe put it out to some companies to see how much, maybe a portion of that roadway and how much that project may be. And we're hoping that because there's excess material there, excess possible good material, that maybe a contractor would be happy with getting 40 to 60,000 yards of excess material because of that cut we're doing. We could get a great cost to have that access road put in, but also get that price together so we can submit it to DEP to show them what we're looking at, but also dual track that with what you're talking about as far as looking in other areas of town as well. Because when you talk about drilling up in the kind of the northwest quadrant of town, those are going to be bedrock wells. So to get a truck in there and to drill a bedrock well to see what's there, we're not looking at $60,000. You're not looking at specialized equipment. We can do that for much less money. We don't have 10 sites to drill. We have maybe 1 or 2 sites that are going to let us, right now where we have property owners who are willing to let us on their property to drill that exploratory well. So I think we can dual track everything as part of that next step.
I understand what you're saying, Peter. I think there's a couple other sites in town, I think, that we could look at, but the bottom line on it is, okay, I think that we really need to put our energy into becoming interconnected with Southbridge long term. I'm seeing this chasing for water. I'm looking back in the history. It's been going on for at least 40 years now, okay, in this town. Okay? And I think that we're, just chasing a ghost. And I totally agree with you, as far as spending the money that is not going to come out of the town any further, okay, on the grants for whatever we can do. If we can do it under grant, I'm 100% with you. If we have to start spending town funds on chasing the ghost, I'm not with it.
I think one big component to look at in the whole equation, Phil, is dealing with the town of Southbridge. And right now, we have a great relationship. We have a phenomenal relationship. It hasn't always been that way. And it's been really, really rocky at points in time in the past. And that relationship can fluctuate depending on who is on the city council. In the past, it's been extremely turbulent, and I think putting together the agreement that we have today, we got very lucky in doing so, and it has served us well. That has a time limit on it. And
yes, 20 years. Okay, and I think that's where we need to put our energy and our money. Okay, let's do anything we can to foster that relationship and bring it out to infinitum, an indefinite, agreement. Okay, I think that's where the money and the time and the lawyers should go. Okay, if it costs us a little extra money, so be it. I mean, but the bottom line is we're, chasing a ghost, as I said.
Well, I can't say that I haven't thought the way that you're talking. And I mean, it's been a constant discussion with all of us on the board, I think.
I can see that the last, as far back as I could go in minutes and so forth. So I think Peter is on the right idea, which is as long as we're spending money that's, from grant, let's go forward. If we're starting to spend town money again, I think we need to put that duly into, the interconnected water system and moving forward. And I'd rather see us put our money, if we can get grants, to bring that loop around from Route 20 so that we can just totally energize the whole Route 20 with water and sewer. As Peter mentioned, they're going to redo the whole road there. When? 2022?
Correct.
Then
In
Route
spring
20?
of 2022, they're gonna start.
Yeah. So I'd rather see us put our money into that, make sure those pipes are okay, and bring them around and energize that loop, get sewer and water on that, and let's, get some economic development down that end of Route 20.
Keep in mind, the town of Southbridge is not going to extend the water much past the ADT garage. That it's gone now as far as it's going to go because it's too far to maintain the quality they want.
Well, if we put in our own treatment system in the middle, then we wouldn't have that problem.
So if we're able to become a consecutive water supply, then Southbridge wouldn't care what we did because we'd be responsible for water quality.
Correct.
There are different things that we could look at doing as far as retreating, like you mentioned, at our water tank on Route 20. But there'd have to be quite a bit of water modeling done and studies done to make sure that would be effective. So I think for me, I think the best thing to happen is that we land in the middle of both things. We don't necessarily go one way or the other, and we try and just make both things happen.
I think, Peter, you're always right on track. So I think the middle is the word, but I think that we need to work both sides of the equation at the same time equally.
No, and I guess so again, I have been reaching out to the town of Southbridge. I believe the new town manager's only been there for 2 to 4 weeks. And
Right.
the DPW director is just kind of meeting him for her first time. So I'm hoping, again, consecutive water is one of my probably top 3 priorities because we're getting to the point now where we own the infrastructure and we're either at that, it kind of, not that it boxes us in, but we're either going to be in or we're going to be out. And the fact that we own the infrastructure, we're responsible, we have to maintain it, just puts us to that point where, if we can make it work, if it's feasible, then we should be in. And that's where that's where I'm trying to get us to.
Yeah, well, the one thing I will say is if we do it, it's a given, and then we know what we got, and then we know what the price is going to be, and we know we're going forward. And therefore, on the economic development side of it, we can take that into account. We can bring that Flint road loop in and a few other situations in the town that are a little spurious at this point. And, just get on with it. That's where I'm at this point after looking at everything.
Understood. So as far as, just to backtrack a little bit, as far as the site plan as presented, I'll talk to Beta to move that pump station and staging area away from the homes. If we need to, we can do away with the staging area, move the pump station further down as far as we can to make sure it's not too far down gradient so it's affected by flooding. And we'll go ahead and present it to planning and conservation for approval under the FY20 grant.
Okay, I think that's a great idea, and thank you, because we had talked about that one before.
Yeah,
I thought we all on that.
No, I must have missed that. I'm sorry. I didn't follow through with it. But
it's like there's not enough things on your desk. Come on, let's be real here.
Yeah. And then as far as the FY21 scope of services, we'll just kind of hold that for now. I'll let the DEP. I'll reach out to my contact at the DEP and let her know that we're reviewing what we've done so far, and we're trying to put our best foot forward and preparing the FY21 scope of services to move forward with.
Okay. One other question. I'm sorry. When do the school systems come on board?
Bay Path will hopefully, the pump station will be active hopefully in the next couple of weeks. As far as the other two schools, they're starting to do services to the homes on Old Worcester Road at this point for the residents who have decided to connect. The mains are, the service connections are being plumbed into the basement and capped at this time until there's enough there to activate the water line, and then they'll have their plumber come in and make all the internal connections. So at this point, the priority is getting Bay Path on because they're probably one of the larger users off of North Main Street. Get Muggett Hill Road activated to Bay Path, and then start to look at what has to be done to connect the other two schools to water and get them active as step 2.
So it sounds like we got about 2 months out anyways before the school systems come on board. And are they back in, by the way?
Right now they're back in hybrid. I believe maybe October 13th or 14th that week, they may be back where all students are back either in Group A or Group B, where they split the week in school and remote.
So we will have water usage. That I'm just thinking about, you know.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, not to monopolize things, Peter. Okay.
That's okay. So again, as far as the FY21 scope of services, again, I think I was talking about putting that on hold until we get the site plan done anyways. And so we'll move forward with planning board and conservation for the site plan of the Buffinville site, and get that back. As long as there's no issues, we'll hopefully I'll have more information on some of the other topics we've discussed, where we can put a good package together to present to the state for the FY21 funding.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right, so we're ready to move on to special town meeting.
Yes, so our water and sewer retained earnings have been certified. For water, our retained earnings are $258,138, and sewer retained earnings are $943,486. The retained earnings is a figure that is based on what we have left in retained earnings from the previous year, the funds that we didn't spend from our previous year operating budget, and any possible unaccounted for revenue or expenditures for debt. Last year, we created separate water and sewer stabilization accounts for us to transfer retained earnings into each year. One of the main reasons we did that is when these funds just sit in retained earnings, they kind of, I'm going to say they're in limbo. If we put them into a stabilization account, they're actually in an interest-bearing account where we can, the stabilization account itself will collect the interest and grow. So our water stabilization account, because of the ExxonMobil settlement agreement, is at $3,573,250 and change. And our sewer stabilization account is currently at $1,623,877 and change. We do have some transfer articles on special town meeting to be funded from water retained earnings. We're requesting $63,400 to the FY21 water capital account for the cost of the 2 Route 20 water line repairs, and $21,000 from retained earnings to fund half of the new truck. Because of these transfers, I would not recommend that we make a transfer from water retained earnings to water stabilization at this time, and that'll leave approximately $170,000 in water retained earnings. For sewer, yep.
If we add $200,000 to this budget, do we want to add any more changes in the stabilization funds or not?
For water or for sewer?
For SCADA.
Oh, for SCADA. No, I think the motion that you made for the $200,000 for SCADA upgrade will be good. I wouldn't recommend any other changes at this time.
Thank you.
So that way there, again, our water retained earnings will be ballpark $170,000, and we'll see what happens next year when the retained earnings get certified. For sewer, we previously had.
Just a quick question. Why wouldn't we transfer the 170?
We just always leave a little bit in there. I believe if it's easier to transfer from retained earnings than from stabilization in case you have to make a transfer to the operating budget at the annual or the special. I believe it's only simple majority. Stabilization is either 3/4 or 7/8.
Yep.
Again, not
Two-thirds, right?
maybe 2/3. Yeah. So not that what we'd request would be out of the ordinary, or we wouldn't be able to explain and get enough people to agree with to get the 2/3 vote. But again, in talking with the finance director, it just always made sense to leave a little bit in free cash in the retained.
Yep.
So for sewer, sure. For sewer, we had no, we can zero it out if you want, but I mean I can double check with the finance director. But in my previous discussions, she just recommended we leave that little bit in there. For sewer, we previously had the one article to transfer from retained earnings to fund the half of the new truck. So I was recommending that we transferred $418,000 from sewer retained earnings to sewer stabilization, which would bring our sewer stabilization count up over 2 million.
Yep.
I recommend we keep that the same. And if we fund the SCADA upgrade from retained earnings, our sewer retained earnings will be left at approximately 300,000.
300. Okay.
Which I think is a good number considering our operating budget for sewer is approximately 1.2 million. So to leave a third of that or a quarter of that in retained earnings, I think is good.
I agree. I'm in favor.
Great.
Second that.
All right, then we'll move forward. Again, this is more just to kind of, I know we didn't talk about sewer retained earnings last time we talked about special town meeting, and I'm not sure, I think they might have just gotten certified a couple days before our meeting, so I'm not even sure if I had the information. So, but this follows the same process we did last year and just kind of shows you the numbers of what we have. I did ask the finance director why our sewer retained earnings were so high, and she said some of the debt is starting to come off, whether it be from the phase 2 project or not. Some of the debt's starting to go away, and the betterment payments lag a couple of years from when the debt started. So that was part of the reason why it was so high.
Unfortunately, I think we're going to end up spending it just to upgrade the system.
I don't disagree. Again, probably 8 years ago now, or maybe 2008 or 2010 was when the last upgrade was done at the plant, and that's when the COMAG process was installed to be able to treat for the phosphorus that they were having issues with. That upgrade was approximately $2.6 to $2.8 million. And
and if we have to go into something other to treat the zinc, we're talking probably $400,000.
Right. So, but the one nice thing is that they were able to do that $2.8 million upgrade without raising rates or without doing privilege or betterment fees to the customers, to the existing customers. That was funded.
That tells you that people are doing it right. Thank you, Peter.
So, and again, because past practice has been to set money aside and try and plan ahead. We have a sewer stabilization account where we would be able to fund a $400,000 or $500,000 improvement without having to increase rates or do any type of additional charges to the users. So hopefully that stays the way it is, and we're able to keep on replenishing what we might use from stabilization to make those improvements in the future. If there's no other questions on that, we can move forward.
Sure, let's move ahead.
Okay. So our last
No one has
meeting,
any-
at our last meetings, we discussed the personnel review policy being introduced by HR and the town administrator. Part of that policy requires us to identify goals and objectives that you would like me to work on the remainder of this fiscal year. At the end of the fiscal year, you will use those goals and objectives during my performance review. At our last meeting, Mr. Donahue identified a couple of items, the zinc pilot study and the beta project. And again, I would recommend that we kind of identify continued work on the Bufferville public water supply, continued work on becoming a consecutive water supply, completion of the EQ tank blower upgrade, and continued oversight of the school loop and water line project. I guess we can also add the SCADA upgrade for the sewer plant.
If we can add the additional research for new potential water sources as well, Peter.
Yeah.
I'd like to also add the consecutive water with Southbridge.
Okay. That's when I say continued work on becoming a consecutive water supply, I'm referencing that same thing.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Thank you. Sorry, I
That's okay.
wasn't looking at the screen.
Does anybody have anything else?
Just, I think you're doing a great job, as I've said to you about 50 times already.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, I know sometimes I'm difficult, but the bottom line is, if you don't ask the hard questions, you don't get the real answers.
No, I think it's good. The input is welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, so do you want to give us the waterline construction update, Peter?
Sure. Again, so the Albany Brothers has been working to finalize the installation. Well, the Bay Path pump station is installed. They're looking to finalize the activation process. Hopefully it'll be operational by the end of this month. Again, I believe they flushed the water lines on Mugget Hill Road, getting that water ready to go. They've installed all the fiber network that needs to be done for the controls for the pump station. And hopefully they have in there the pump station designer and everyone come out to do a test run in the next week or two, and hopefully it will be operational by the end of October. And once that's operational, that gets water flowing to there, then we can start looking, as Mr. Donahue was asking, about getting the water turned on at the Heritage School and the middle school, and that will be the next step.
Peter, can I ask just a stupid question to the side? What standards has Exxon had to apply to as far as putting in the pipes underground? I mean, have they followed what you've recommended? Or
that was all completed before I came on board. They pretty much use Southbridge's construction standards. So because right now, whenever anyone calls, because Southbridge is operating the system, we defer to Southbridge's construction standards.
okay, I'll take a look at those. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. They're pretty comprehensive
I
as far as
presume
water
they're pretty-
goes. Yeah.
I would presume they're pretty tight.
So as far as the school loop goes, the water main installation, Albany Brothers has finished paving the roads affected by the water line installation. They're still doing some touch-up work on driveway aprons and backing up the road edges, but they're pretty much done, hopefully with any road closures. As they do the service lines, it will be probably down to one lane on Old Worcester Road and the roads where they'll be making the residential connections, but there should be hopefully no more closed roads due to the water main project. I think it's important to, again, thank the residents again for their patience during this project. It has spanned quite a while, and they have been impacted, again, quite a bit with the roads closed, and the timing with the Route 20 project wasn't great either, but with their repaving from Mass DOT. But Again, we tried to do the best we could, trying not to inconvenience too many people at once. So again, we appreciate their patience. As far as the service connections goes, again, ExxonMobil has amended their agreement with Albanese Brothers to include these service connections. There was not a second contract made. So Kleinfelder is working with residents to coordinate the service line work. At this time, they've received approximately 95 commitments to connect to the water line out of the approximately 200 possible homes. So I believe they've gotten 3 done already on Old Worcester Road. Again, those of you familiar with the area, they're starting down by the Route 20 side of Old Worcester Road, near Old Worcester Road Extension. Some of those houses are set fairly far back from the road, so they're not 30 or 40-foot runs to make that water line installation. So it's taking them a day or two, maybe 4 for each individual home. So they are bringing, the Albanese Brothers is going to bring in 2 or 3 more crews. So they'll have 2 or 3 crews working at once, especially once they're done backing up all the road edges and doing all of that other paving work. So hopefully once they get those 2 or 3 crews going, it'll start going a little bit quicker. And they'll be able to get that water line active and get those residents connected. And again, the school loop has not yet been activated, so the 1-year grace period has not begun.
So Peter, we've talked about sending out certified letters before. Okay, I think we need to send those out probably in, January, February. If we send them out in the non-area of being able to actually attach, it's just going to get lost in the, Mishigosh. So maybe next February we send those letters out instead of, as soon as the 1 month grace period's over.
I thought we were going to send those out when the 1-year grace period began to let people know that they had 1 year to connect.
Yeah, I think that would be good, but then we probably need to send out a second notice in February, March, because people will not think about that during the middle of the winter when they can't get attached.
I'm not sure the 1-year grace period will start before next spring.
Okay, well, if
It might be a while.
In my discussion, the 1-year grace period will not start until the entire loop is active.
Okay, now I got it.
And again, depending on how aggressive they get with activating that loop, that may change. But as far as it goes right now, I suppose
they have to be active and problem-free on that line.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they're not close.
Not
It's not going to be next month.
Not unless they get really aggressive and said, you know what, revalve it, let Overlook pull all the water and see what happens. But I'm not sure that that Southbridge is going to allow that at this point.
So we're done with this issue. I want to go on to old business.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now, Peter, can you explain a little bit more, because it was new to me when we last talked, what's going to actually happen in 2022 with repositioning our lines under Route 20 from Richardson Corner, out?
So the Mass DOT is proposing to continue the Jersey barriers from Richardson's Corner Road on Route 20 in Charlton, heading east all the way to routes 12 and 20 in Oxford. So they're going to widen the road. They're going to have to do property takings. They're going to redesign the entire thing, change drainage, change telephone pole locations, change guardrail locations, widen the road, narrow the lanes, install a true Jersey barrier like what's currently existing on Route 20 and just west of Richardson's Corner Road. As part of that construction, there's 2 areas where our water main is going to be relocated. by Mass DOT. There's one area where they're gonna propose to relocate approximately 500 feet. And then there's another area pretty close where they're gonna relocate an additional, say, 250 feet of water main, due to the fact that when they move the guardrails, the new guardrails or drainage might be right on top of or in the way of our existing water line. So as part of that, in my discussions, again, I think I've discussed this with maybe Phil and Russ regarding the construction, is making sure that what would be interesting is when that water line is relocated or removed, we'll be able to see the condition of the pipe to see if there is the same type of corrosion issue that we saw up by North Side Road, or we'll be able to tell if it's just an isolated incident in that area. So it'll be interesting to see what type of condition that pipe is in. One of the other things that I've talked about is the need to probably flush and pressure test that entire portion of water line before their contractor even touches it. Because it's one thing for them to disturb their one area of water line, but while they disturb that, they could cause problems in another portion of the water line further down the line. So I've requested that they pressure test before the entire system to make sure it's tight, and then that they pressure test after to make sure that it is still tight when they're done. So
Have you gotten an agreement to that fact?
I haven't received formal agreement, no, but the initial feedback was fine, because they understand as well that if the second they touch a portion of that water line to relocate it, there's no way for them not to own it. And the only way for them to protect themselves of that is to pressure test it before to make sure that there's no issues. So by doing that beforehand, it protects us and it protects them as well.
Well, I'm going to put forward a motion that the board has a independent auditor or contractor, be it Kleinfelder, whoever, okay, be on site when they do that.
Procedurally, I'd recommend that if you want to discuss this and make a formal motion, we can put it on our next agenda as an agenda item to make sure that it's done as an agenda item. I think it's one thing to have a preliminary discussion and make the request to put something on the next agenda, but to make a motion on a topic that's not that hasn't been posted, I would kind of recommend against at this time.
I understand what he's saying. Okay, I see the issue there, and I would add that to the next agenda item.
So we're going to designate an inspector on that one?
Well, at this point, Mr. Chair.
I'm only.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Full circle. I like it.
Yes. Tying it back in. But so you're satisfied with put it on the next agenda?
Yep. Driving you guys
Okay.
crazy tonight. Sorry, but that's life.
Nope.
But I think we want an independent person there, sitting there saying, hey, listen, hey, you're not doing this. You're responsible for it. And if we need to replace the whole 4 miles and you blow it out, then it's on you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we're talking about $2 million right there.
Yep. All right. Is that was that your only issue for old business or new business?
Oh, I can
Unknown.
come up with more, but I think I've done my duty tonight.
Very good. Anyone else? Any business not known at the time of posting? Oh, I guess that leaves us one final item.
Real quick, I want to talk about your next meeting. Do you want to go to your once a month schedule now, or do you want to try and meet towards the end of this month?
We're talking about work readjoining in a week. Okay, is that correct?
No. To meet in 1 week?
I thought that they said they would have data available for us in 1 week.
Yep.
And then they would want us to review it.
Yes. I can forward that to you to review. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if you want to do that in the meeting, we can. I was just thinking I would forward all that data to you and the draft report for you to review, and then you can just provide me with comments. But if you want to convene a meeting, we can do that as well.
I think we want to convene a meeting to review stuff. Okay, I don't think we want to do that in a void.
Okay.
Well, if everyone's in agreement, then we're going to receive all the information back within a week, he said, which means a week from. If we were to have a meeting in 2 weeks, that would give us enough time to review that information and then be able to discuss and make a decision, right?
Correct, and I also think it would also take care of the proposal of Peter's extensive work on Framingham into the town of Charlton's water source system.
Yep. And that would be too soon for Treehouse to get on. They wouldn't have their data, would they?
I'll mention it to them, but I don't think so. Not from what I've seen so far. No.
It'd be looking at more of a month out.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to suggest we stick with the 3 weeks through the beginning of the year.
So do you want to meet on the 19th or the 26th?
I think the
Let's
19th. Russ, go for it.
2 weeks, 19th.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then we look at redoing things. That's what we said, was just giving you flexible anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's the nice thing is as things come up, as you know, you have items that you want to get together and discuss, it's very easy to post a meeting and get together and do that. So, and if it's quiet, we can just kind of go off and meet the first Monday of every month. So we can definitely be flexible and change as necessary.
Okay.
So we're
So our
planning
next
on,
meeting-
Great idea. Russ, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Sue, Peter, thank you.
all right.
All right. So I guess we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Very good. Roll call vote.
Mr. Gagner,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Cantwell,
Aye.
Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
Thank you,
Have a
gentlemen.
good
Have a
Take
good
care.
evening. Bye.
Take care, everybody. Okay, Peter, Motrin or Tylenol?
I know.
Yeah. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
You too. Thank you very much.
All right. Good night.